I fired our nanny through a security camera, convinced she was harming my children. But her parting words, a chilling prophecy that came true overnight, revealed I had just undone everything. The termination was cold, clinical, and done through the speaker of a security camera. I know how that sounds. It makes me sound like a monster, a heartless corporate drone who can't even fire his nanny face to face. But when you see what I saw, when you believe your children are in danger, protocol and politeness are the first things you throw out the window. All you have left is a raw, protective instinct that screams louder than anything else. Let me back up. My world revolves around two tiny, fragile people. My twins, Leo and Mia. They were born 2 years ago, and my wife, Sarah, was gone 6 months later. A brain aneurysm. 1 minute she was humming a lullaby to them in their cribs. The next she was gone. The grief was a physical weight, but the terror was worse. Suddenly I was a single father to 2 infants who now carried a piece of my own fragile heart outside my body. And from the very beginning, something was wrong. They were delicate. They cried constantly, not the robust wail of a healthy baby, but a weak, painful whimper. They barely ate. They were always running low-grade fevers, and they had this constant pallor that made my stomach clench with fear every time I looked at them. We lived in a revolving door of specialists, pediatricians, immunologists, gastroenterologists. They ran every test imaginable, drawing more blood from their tiny bodies than I thought possible. The diagnosis was always the same, a frustrating, infuriating shrug. Failure to thrive, they'd call it. A vague label for a host of mysterious symptoms they couldn't explain. I was drowning in medical bills, in sleepless nights, in the terrifying, ever-present fear that I would lose them too. Then came Clara. She was an older woman in her late 50s, with kind eyes and hands that seemed to know exactly how to soothe a crying baby. Her references were impeccable, glowing letters from families who swore she was a miracle worker. From the moment she walked into our house, a strange sense of calm settled over it. She didn't just care for Leo and Mia, she seemed to understand them. She'd hum old, forgotten folk songs, and their whimpering would soften. She'd mash up strange combinations of vegetables and herbs, and for the first time, they would finish their bowls. For the first few months, it was paradise. I could finally breathe. I could go to work without my phone clutched in my hand, waiting for a call from a panicked daycare. The twins started to gain weight. The color returned to their cheeks. The fevers became less frequent. The doctors were stunned. They called it a spontaneous remission of whatever ailed them, but I knew it was Clara. She was our angel, our savior. I paid her double her asking rate and told her she was a part of our family. The suspicion started as a tiny, nagging whisper. It began with the smell, a sweet, earthy scent that clung to the nursery, like damp soil and strange flowers. I asked Clara about it, and she just smiled and said it was a potpourri sachet she'd made, an old family recipe for calm air. Then I noticed the twins were almost too calm. They slept through the night, every night for 12 hours straight. For a parent of twins, that should be a dream come true. But their sleep was so deep, it was almost unnatural. Sometimes I'd stand over their cribs, watching their chests, just to make sure they were still breathing. The final straw came when I was cleaning out the medicine cabinet. Tucked away behind a bottle of children's Tylenol, I found a small, unlabeled amber bottle filled with a dark, viscous liquid. It was sealed with a cork, like something from an old apothecary. When I opened it, that same sweet, earthy smell hit me, only this time it was so concentrated it was almost cloying. A cold dread washed over me. What was this? What was she giving my children? My mind, already scarred by loss and paranoia, jumped to the worst possible conclusions. Was she sedating them? Was this some unregulated herbal concoction that was causing long-term damage I couldn't see? That's when I remembered the cameras. I'd installed them when they were newborns. A worried father's crutch. I hadn't looked at the live feed in months, but now my hands were shaking as I pulled up the app on my phone at work. I tapped on the nursery camera, my heart hammering against my ribs. The scene was peaceful. Leo and Mia were in their cribs, looking drowsy after their lunch. Clara was tidying up. her movements calm and efficient. For a moment I felt a wave of relief. I was being ridiculous, a paranoid, grieving husband looking for shadows in the dark. I was about to close the app when she stopped. She looked towards the door, then glanced around the room, a subtle, furtive movement that made the hair on my arms stand up. She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a bottle. Not the one from the cabinet, but a smaller, identical one. My blood ran cold. She uncorked it and used a small dropper to carefully measure out the dark liquid onto a spoon. She moved to Leo's crib first. He turned his head away, and she gently but firmly held his chin and tipped the spoon into his mouth. She did the same for Mia. My vision tunneled. I saw red. This woman, this angel I had trusted with the most precious things in my life, was secretly drugging my children right under my nose. I didn't think. I didn't consider any other possibility. I just reacted. I hit the microphone icon on the app. My voice, distorted and metallic, boomed through the nursery speaker. "What do you think you're doing?" Clara jumped, dropping the bottle, which thankfully didn't break. She stared wildly around the room before her eyes landed on the small, black lens of the camera in the corner. Her face went pale. "Mr. Henderson, I can explain," she stammered. "There's nothing to explain," I snarled, my voice shaking with rage. "I saw everything. Pack your bags, Clara. Get out of my house. You're done." A torrent of emotions crossed her face. Shock, fear, and then something else. Something I couldn't read. It wasn't guilt. It was despair. She looked directly into the camera, her kind eyes now filled with a chilling intensity. Her voice, when she spoke, was no longer stammering. It was steady, quiet, and filled with a terrifying certainty. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her words cutting through my anger like ice. "By doing this, you've just undone everything. They'll be sick again by morning." Her words hung in the air, a cold, sharp-edged prophecy. "They'll be sick again by morning." For a second my rage faltered, replaced by a flicker of confusion. But then the anger roared back, hotter than before. A threat. A desperate, manipulative lie from a woman caught in the act. How dare she? How dare she use my children's health, the very thing I lived and breathed to protect, as a weapon against me? "Get out, Clara," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "Get out now. If you're not gone in 30 minutes, I'm calling the police." I didn't wait for a reply. I ended the connection, the screen on my phone going black, severing my link to the house. My hands were shaking, not with fear, but with a pure, unadulterated fury. I had trusted her. I had called her family. And she had been drugging my kids, probably to make her job easier, to make them quiet and compliant. The improvements in their health? It must have been a coincidence, a fluke. Or worse, maybe the drugs masked the symptoms, creating a facade of wellness while something more sinister brewed beneath. I left work in a daze, mumbling some excuse about a family emergency. The drive home was a blur of red lights and blaring horns. My mind was a prosecutor's office, laying out the evidence against her, the secrecy, the strange smell, the unlabeled bottle, and now the final damning video footage. Each piece of evidence solidified my conviction. I had done the right thing. I had saved them. I had exposed a monster. When I pulled into the driveway, her beat-up sedan was gone. The house was silent, eerily so. The calm that I had once found so comforting now felt menacing. I walked in, calling out their names. Leo, Mia. Half of me expected to find them listless in their cribs, already succumbing to whatever she'd given them. I burst into the nursery, my heart in my throat. They were awake, sitting up and looking at me with wide, clear eyes. A wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled my knees washed over me. They were fine. Of course they were fine. I had caught her in time. Clara had left with an unnerving efficiency. Her room was tidy, the bed made. The only trace of her was a faint lingering of that sweet, earthy scent. And on the nursery floor, nestled in the soft rug, was the small bottle she had dropped. I picked it up. It felt cool in my palm. I uncorked it and took a hesitant sniff. It smelled of damp earth, licorice, and something else. Something faintly floral and medicinal. It was strange, but not unpleasant. For a moment her final words echoed in my mind. "They'll be sick again by morning." I shook my head, chasing the thought away. It was a curse, a final desperate attempt to get inside my head. I went to the kitchen, dumped the dark, syrupy liquid down the drain, and watched as the water washed it away. I tossed the bottle in the recycling bin with a satisfying thud. It was over. That evening was difficult. The twins were fussy, more so than they had been in a year. They pushed their food away, the same food they'd eagerly eaten just last night. They cried when I put them down for bed, clinging to me with a strength I hadn't felt from them in months. I told myself it was the disruption. Their routine had been shattered. The calm presence they were used to was suddenly, violently gone. I sat between their cribs long after they'd fallen into a restless sleep, watching the gentle rise and fall of their chests. I felt a pang of something not regret, but a deep, aching sadness that this quiet sanctuary had been violated. I barely slept. I kept the baby monitor on my nightstand, the volume turned up high. Every sniffle, every rustle of blankets sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. But the night passed with nothing more than a few whimpers. I finally drifted off in the pre-dawn hours, convinced I had weathered the storm, that her words were nothing but empty threats. The sound that woke me was not a cry. It was a gasp, a weak, wheezing gasp for air, followed by that all-too-familiar painful whimper. It was a sound I hadn't heard in over a year, a sound I had prayed I would never hear again. It was the sound of my children's sickness. I flew out of bed and into their room. The morning light was just beginning to filter through the blinds, casting the room in gray, dusty stripes. And what I saw stopped my heart. Mia was pale, a ghostly white, with dark circles already forming under her eyes. Her skin was clammy to the touch, and her breath came in shallow, labored puffs. In the other crib, Leo was curled into a tight ball, shivering despite the warmth of the room. I laid my hand on his forehead and flinched. He was burning up. The fever was back. The pallor, the weakness, the painful, hopeless whimpering, it was all back. It was as if the last year of health and happiness had been nothing more than a dream. Every bit of progress, every ounce they'd gained, every bit of color in their cheeks had vanished overnight. Clara's words slammed into me, no longer a threat but a statement of fact. And by doing this, you've just undone everything. A horrifying realization began to dawn, a truth so monstrous I could barely let it into my mind. That dark liquid wasn't a sedative. It was their medicine. It was their cure. And I had just poured it down the drain. Panic, cold, and absolute seized me. For a moment I was paralyzed, trapped in the gray morning light of the nursery, the weak cries of my children sawing at my nerves. My first instinct was to call 911. My second was to call the doctors, to schedule an emergency appointment, to start the whole soul-crushing cycle all over again. But a third, more terrifying thought pushed its way through the fog of my fear. What if they couldn't help? They hadn't been able to help before. For a year, the best minds in pediatric medicine had shrugged their shoulders while my children faded away. Clara was the only one who had stopped it. Clara and her little brown bottle. I scooped them both out of their cribs, their bodies feeling terrifyingly light and fragile in my arms. Their fevers seemed to radiate through my shirt. I paced the floor, shushing and rocking them, my mind racing. I had fired her. I had accused her. I had threatened her with the police. I had dumped the only thing that was keeping my children healthy down the sink. The sheer, cataclysmic stupidity of my actions crashed down on me. I hadn't been a protective father. I had been an arrogant, paranoid fool. I had seen a woman performing a secret ritual of care, and through the distorted lens of my own fear, had twisted it into an act of malice. My phone felt like a lead weight in my hand. I pulled up her contact information. My thumb hovered over the call button, frozen with shame and desperation. What would I even say? "Hi, Clara. It's the man who fired you over a speaker and accused you of drugging his kids. Turns out you were right, and I'm a complete idiot. Can you please come back and save them again?" It was humiliating. It was insane. But as Mia let out another weak, gasping cry against my shoulder, pride ceased to matter. I pressed the call button. It rang. Once, twice. On the third ring, it went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Clara. I can't come to the phone right now, but please leave a message." Her voice, so calm and gentle, was like a knife in my gut. "Clara," I started, my own voice cracking. "Clara, it's Mark Henderson. Please, please, I need you to call me back. It's the twins. They're sick. You were right. God, you were right about everything. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Please, just call me." I hung up, my hand trembling. I sent a text, then another, each one more frantic and pleading than the last. The response was a deafening silence. I tried to get the twins to eat, but they turned their heads away, their little mouths clamped shut. I tried to give them Tylenol for the fever, but they spit most of it out. By noon they were listless, their whimpers fading into an exhausted silence that scared me more than their crying. They just lay there, their eyes half closed, their breathing shallow. The color was draining from them, like watching a photograph fade in the sun. This was it. This was the rapid, terrifying decline I remembered from their first year. Only this time it felt faster, more aggressive, as if the illness held at bay for so long was now rushing back with a vengeance. My desperation morphed into a grim, frantic energy. I had to find her. I tore through the recycling bin, pulling out milk cartons and junk mail until my fingers closed around the small glass bottle. I had washed it, but maybe there was a residue, a clue. I held it up to the light, searching for any kind of label or marking. There was nothing, just smooth, brown glass. I then went to her room, the one she had occupied for over a year. I searched it like a detective. I went through the small desk, the nightstand, the closet. I found nothing but a few spare uniforms and a well-worn book of poetry. No notes, no strange herbs, no other bottles. It was like she had scrubbed herself from our lives. Then, under her mattress, I felt a loose floorboard. My heart leapt. I pried it up with my fingers. Beneath it was a small, worn, leather-bound journal. It was old, the pages yellowed and brittle. I opened it. The writing inside was a delicate, spidery script, and it wasn't English. It looked like some form of cursive I didn't recognize, interspersed with intricate drawings of plants and flowers. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning for anything I could understand. I saw sketches of Leo and Mia, their names written carefully beside the drawings. There were dates, and next to them what looked like dosage notes and observations. Fever down. Appetite improved. Color returning. It was a logbook, a record of her care for my children. My frantic search led me to her employment file. I had her address, the one from her application over a year ago. It was a long shot for all I knew. It was an old address, or she had moved. But it was all I had. I called my neighbor, a retired woman named Mrs. Gable, who adored the twins, and begged her to come sit with them for an hour. Her face fell when she saw them. "Oh, the poor dears," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "They look just like they did before Clara came." The words were another stab of guilt. I gave her the pediatrician's number and told her to call me if their breathing got any worse. The address led me to a rundown part of town I rarely visited. It was an old apartment building, the brick crumbling, the windows streaked with grime. I found her apartment number 3B and knocked, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Clara, it's Mark Henderson. Please, I need to talk to you." The only response was the sound of a television blaring from a neighboring apartment. I tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. Hesitantly, I pushed the door open. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished, but immaculately clean. It smelled faintly of that same earthy scent from her potpourri. Bunches of dried herbs hung from the ceiling, and shelves were lined with dozens and dozens of those same little brown bottles, all neatly labeled in that same spidery script. It was an apothecary, and in the center of the room, sitting in a simple wooden chair, was an old woman. But it wasn't Clara. This woman was much older, her face a roadmap of deep wrinkles, her hair as white as snow. She looked at me, her eyes a startlingly pale blue, and they held no surprise, as if she had been expecting me all along. "You're looking for my daughter," she said, her voice thin and reedy, but with an undeniable strength. "She's not here." Where is she? I asked, my voice tight with urgency. My children, they're sick. I need her help. The old woman gave a slow, sad shake of her head. She can't help you anymore. Not now. She gestured to a framed photograph on the wall. It was of a much younger Clara, smiling, her arm around a man. But my eyes were drawn to the date etched on a small brass plate at the bottom of the frame. Clara had been dead for 5 years. The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Clara had been dead for 5 years. I stared at the photograph, then back at the old woman, my mind refusing to process the information. It was impossible. Clara had been in my house yesterday. She had held my children, fed them, sang to them. I had seen her with my own eyes. I had spoken to her. No, I stammered, shaking my head. That's not possible. That can't be Clara. I employed her. For over a year. The old woman's pale blue eyes softened with a profound sadness. My daughter's name was Ilara, she said, her voice a fragile whisper. But some called her Clara. She was a healer, like me, like my mother before me. She pointed a trembling finger at the photo. An accident, a car, 5 years ago. She was gone. My reality tilted on its axis. The floor seemed to fall away, leaving me suspended in a state of utter disbelief. Was this a cruel joke? Had I gone mad? But who was the woman in my house? The question came out as a choked plea. A spirit cannot rest when there is work to be done, the old woman said simply, as if explaining the weather. My Ilara, she had a gift for sensing children in pain, especially those the doctors had given up on. Your twins, she felt their suffering. She was drawn to them. She couldn't move on until she knew they were safe. I sank into a chair opposite her, my legs unable to support me. A ghost. I had hired a ghost to be my nanny. The strange calmness of the house, her uncanny ability to soothe the twins, the way she just seemed to appear in our lives when we needed her most. It all started to click into place with a terrifying, supernatural logic. The earthy smell wasn't potpourri. It was the scent of the grave, of life returning to the soil. Her deep, unnatural sleep wasn't from a sedative. It was a manifestation of her otherworldly peace. The medicine, I whispered, my eyes flicking to the shelves of bottles. What is it? It is what the earth gives us, she replied, her gaze distant. Old knowledge, things that grow in the moonlight, in forgotten places, things that modern medicine has dismissed. Ilara learned it all from me. The tonic holds the sickness at bay. It doesn't cure it, not forever, but it gives the body the strength to fight, to grow, to heal itself. But it must be given every day, a single missed dose, and the sickness returns. My blood ran cold. I had broken the cycle. In my arrogance and fear, I had banished the one spirit who was protecting my children and thrown away their only hope. I need more, I said, my voice raw with desperation. Please, I'll pay you anything. The old woman, Ilara's mother, shook her head slowly. I cannot make it. My hands are too old, my eyes too weak. The plants must be gathered at precise times under the right moon. It was Ilara's work. She paused, her pale eyes locking onto mine. But she left some, for emergencies. She knew humans were often guided by fear. She rose stiffly from her chair and walked to a heavy wooden chest in the corner of the room. With a key that hung around her neck, she unlocked it. Inside, nestled on a bed of dried lavender, were a dozen of the small brown bottles. It was a treasure more valuable than all the gold in the world. This is all that is left, she said, her voice heavy with finality. It will not last forever, but it will buy you time. She carefully placed 3 bottles into a small cloth bag and handed it to me. She also left this, for you. She gave me a single, folded piece of paper. It was from the leather journal. I took the bag, my hands trembling. Thank you, I breathed, the words utterly inadequate. I am so sorry for everything. She simply nodded. Do not be sorry. Be a good father. That is all she ever wanted. I rushed home, my mind a whirlwind of grief, gratitude, and supernatural shock. Mrs. Gable met me at the door, her face etched with worry. The twins were worse. Their breathing was more shallow, their skin frighteningly pale. I ran to the nursery, uncorked one of the bottles with shaking fingers, and used the dropper to carefully place a few drops of the dark, earthy liquid onto their tongues. Then I sat between their cribs and unfolded the piece of paper. On it, in that same delicate script, was a list. Not of ingredients, but of foods. Simple things: boiled carrots, thyme, pureed pears, bone broth, rosemary. Below the list was a simple sentence: "Their bodies are strong enough now. Trust the earth. Trust yourself." It wasn't a recipe for the tonic. It was a recipe for their recovery. The tonic, I realized, hadn't been a cure. It had been a bridge. It had suppressed the mysterious illness, fought off the fevers and the weakness, and given their tiny, fragile bodies the chance to grow, to build the strength they needed to fight on their own. Clara Elara hadn't been creating a dependency. She had been nurturing them toward independence. She was a healer in the truest sense of the word. She had done her work, and now it was my turn. Within an hour of receiving the tonic, the color began to return to Leo and Mia's cheeks. Their breathing evened out. The fever broke. By evening they were awake, alert, and for the first time in 24 hours, they were hungry. I followed the list from the journal, preparing the simple, nourishing foods. And they ate. They ate with an appetite that brought tears to my eyes. The next few months were a quiet journey of faith and healing. I used the tonic sparingly, only when I saw the slightest hint of pallor or lethargy returning. I focused on the diet she had laid out, on fresh air, on quiet, peaceful routines. I talked to my children, telling them stories not just about their mother, Sarah, but also about their guardian angel, Clara, the gentle spirit who had refused to leave them behind. The house no longer felt empty or menacing. It felt protected. The last bottle of the tonic now sits on a high shelf in my kitchen, a sacred relic I pray I'll never have to use again. Leo and Mia are thriving. They are rambunctious, happy, healthy 4-year-olds who run and laugh and fill our home with a joy I once thought was lost forever. The doctors are baffled. They call it a miracle, a 1-in-a-million medical anomaly. I just smile and nod. I know it wasn't a miracle. It was the fierce, undying love of a mother, and the quiet, persistent care of a spirit who couldn't rest until her work was done. I fired my nanny via CCTV, but her secret didn't just shock me. It saved us all.